Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Kody Blois. I'm the Member of Parliament for Kings Hants in beautiful Nova Scotia and the proud chair of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food. As you can see this morning, I'm joined by some friends from the agriculture sector from across Canada. I'll certainly recognize them, and after my remarks, they're going to have the opportunity to speak about a private member's bill that I tabled yesterday that they are in support of and that we're hoping to see the government take on in the days ahead. With me today is Keith Curry, who is the president of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture. We also have Jennifer Babcock, who is Senior Director of Government and Public Affairs with the Canadian Canola Association. We have Jan VanderHout, who is president of the Fruit and Vegetable Growers of Canada. We have Kyle Larkin, Executive Director of Grain Growers of Canada. And we have Rick White, who is president and CEO of the Canadian Canola Growers Association. And, you know, today is a proud day for me as a member of parliament. When we get involved in public life, you want to be able to try to make a difference for the people that you represent. And I'm very privileged in Kings Hants to represent one of the most diverse agriculture communities and sectors, certainly east of Quebec, whether or not it's our supply managed sector, whether or not it's our grains, our beef, our pork, our wine. Boy, I better be careful. I could go down through the list. There is just so much there. Vegetables and fruit growing. We are known for our apple industry in the Annapolis Valley. Simply put, we have a very diverse sector, and I'm very privileged to get to represent them every day. And of course, in my capacity as chair of the House of Commons Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food, I get to talk to these bright agricultural leaders every day, farmers and people that help advocate for farmers here in Ottawa. And it's with those conversations that led to the private member's bill that I introduced yesterday. And the bill is Bill C-359, an act to amend the Feeds Act, Seeds Act, and Pest Control Products Act, provisional registration and approval. And for many folks at home, that may not mean a heck of a lot. But to farmers across the country, this is the type of legislation and initiative that matters for their competitiveness. And I want to explain a little bit about what the bill contemplates and what we're asking of the government in the days ahead. Simply put, in Canada, we have three major regulatory agencies that help provide approvals for farm input products that I mentioned around feeds, seeds, and crop protection. We have Health Canada, we have the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and we have PMRA, which is the Pest Management Regulatory Agency. These regulatory bodies do very good work. Canada is recognized around the world for our good quality and the fact that we have safe products that are available not only to farmers, but of course more broadly are available to protect public safety. But at the same time, competitiveness matters, and the ability to make sure that these products and new tools that become available to farmers can happen in a timely manner. And I think what we've learned over the course of the last couple of years is the ability to rely and work upon organizations and regulatory agencies internationally. And so what the bill proposes is essentially if an applicant arrives in Canada with two existing approvals from a trusted jurisdiction, there would be an ability to provide a 90-day provisional registration. Now, timelines vary between the agencies, but right now, in some cases, it can be a year, 2 years, 3 or more. And the concept really came from many of my apple farmers in the Annapolis Valley who would talk about whether it's different seeds, whether or not it's other crop protection products that generally in Canada we lag behind the United States in terms of having access to these tools or even competitors in Europe. And so the principle of this legislation is saying that if we have other trusted jurisdictions, and it's not my job to determine who a trusted organization, but we want to give those tools available to the regulatory agencies to be able to say, for example, in Europe, we know that if there is an approval in place that it followed a scientific process, that the process was robust and would be similar to the type of practices that our regulators in Canada take on. We know that if that product is approved there, that there's probably a good chance that it's going to be approved in Canada because we have similar scientific practices. You could say, I'm confident here as the Member of Parliament, the United States, Australia, United Kingdom, there may be others. It's not my job as a parliamentarian to tell those regulatory agencies which ones are trusted, but it's important that we create a legislative pathway where we can be able to move on an expedited manner. Right now, the way in Canada that we treat this topic is whether or not it's someone coming from their basement that has come up with a great invention, or it's a company that has 10 existing approvals around the world. Largely, the process is the same. And in the name of Canadian competitiveness in agriculture and making sure that farmers have access to these tools without compromising public safety, that is exactly what Bill C-359 does. And so I am clear, and I'm going to turn it over to my stakeholders to be able to talk about what this matters for them individually as farmers. But what the bill contemplates is the ability for a regulatory agency, let's say CFIA, to take a look at an applicant that arrives, perhaps with 3 existing approvals around the world from jurisdictions that we would trust the scientific basis. They could provide a provisional registration to that product to allow Canadian farmers to have access once they reviewed the science and the decision of other international jurisdictions to say we are confident that this poses a low risk or no risk to the Canadian public. The farmers have access to the tools. I envision a partnership where the continued full regulatory review would continue throughout, but that we could close the gap from what is sometimes 2, 3, 4 years for farmers to have access to these tools to 90 days. If at any point during the full regulatory review there was a reason for caution, a reason for pause, that would be available to the regulator, but otherwise that case would be very low. We can assume because of the strength of the science of other jurisdictions. It is smart public policy to rely on international jurisdictions that share very similar scientific processes. We saw this during the pandemic. Increasingly, I think we need to use this regulatory efficiency to ensure that Canadian farmers have tools to this. So I'm going to keep it at that, but today, as the chair of the Agriculture Committee and in my capacity as a member of Parliament, I am calling, and I believe my friends here in the agriculture sector are going to be calling on 2 things. One, I do want to point to there has been some work in this direction. So, for example, under the feeds regulations, for a number of years now, there has been efforts to move towards allowing foreign jurisdiction decisions to help inform our public policy and our regulatory decisions in Canada. It is extremely, extremely important that those feed regulations are gazetted to the Canadian Gazette number 2 before Christmas. This work has gone on for a number of years. It matters to Canadian agriculture. It matters to our competitiveness, and there should be no further delay. Before Christmas, the government should be able to move forward with this by gazetting it. But the government should also build upon that initiative that has been happening at the regulatory level by taking the legislative concept that I've presented here today and putting it in either the fall economic update in terms of economic legislation or Budget 24, because these are the types of measures that I think need to be expedited. They need to be drawn in, and the best way to do that is for the government itself to take the legislative concept, put it in economic legislation, get it through the House, get it through Parliament as soon as possible so that we can make a difference for Canadian farmers. So it's a privilege for me to now turn the floor over to Keith Currie, who is the president of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, to talk about this concept and why it matters for farmers. Keith, over to you.
Thanks very much, Kody. And as president of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, who represents 190,000 farmers and farm families across this country, I have to say that the introduction of Bill C-359 is a welcome, common sense approach to giving our farmers the access they need to the tools to keep us competitive on not only domestically but on a world stage. And the ability of farmers to have timely access to crop inputs such as feed, seed, and products for use in pest management is extremely important. If producers are to remain competitive in the global market, we must ensure they have the access to the products they need and when they need them. This bill takes a very common sense approach to the regulatory approval process, ensuring the rigor of Canada's regulatory system is maintained while expediting access to critically needed innovations and inputs. By recognizing the already rigorous processes in other jurisdictions as a way to expedite approvals here in Canada, Canadian producers can get access to the products they need faster without jeopardizing our health and safety requirements. For example, Canada's horticulture industry has access to only a small percentage of the available crop protection products, products available to their U.S. counterparts, placing them at a significant disadvantage in the global marketplace. Just this summer, I remember hearing about producers growing lettuce in Quebec. Persistent levels of rain were leading to higher incidence of mold, and suppliers were running out of fungicides. This bill would make it easier for producers in similar situations to get access to equivalent products south of the border and potentially save crops that are subject to extreme weather events that farmers can't avoid. By leveraging the approvals of other jurisdictions, Canadian regulators can speed up their own regulatory processes on a presumptive basis without sacrificing transparency or impeding fulsome science-based approval decisions. CFA's recently released Farm Financial Health Report outlines how farmers are facing tremendous challenges relating to the increased costs of production and how the sector needs to take hold of every opportunity to improve its competitiveness. It includes a suite of recommendations on how to move our sector forward sustainably, one of which is regulatory modernization. We also call on the Government of Canada to release the modernized feed regulations by the end of 2023. With the completion of this 13-year project, we can continue to enhance Canada's approach to expediting foreign approval recognition for feed registrations through the proposed legislation. While we certainly hope to see progress in other critical areas such as updating Canada's feed regulations to articulate clear regulatory approval pathways for gene-edited products, MP Blois's bill is a prime example of a no-cost measure that will help reduce regulatory burden without sacrificing transparency or food safety. At the end of the day, this will improve the competitiveness of Canadian farmers by increasing the products available to them. We strongly encourage the Government of Canada to look at these measures for immediate implementation as a no-cost measure to improve the competitiveness of Canadian agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you. So I will turn it over to Jennifer Babcock with the Canadian Cattle Association, but I want to recognize my parliamentary colleague, Heath MacDonald. Heath is the Member of Parliament for Malpeque, and he has seconded this bill. He's a great champion for agriculture in this country as well, and it's not easy following the footsteps of Wayne Easter either, who was another champion in that regard. But Heath, thank you for your seconding of the bill, and thank you for being here. Jennifer, over to you.
On behalf of the Canadian Cattle Association, I'm pleased to stand up here today and support Kody Blois' private member's bill, C-359 in principle. Having provisional registration and approval for cutting-edge new products is essential for Canadian agriculture to continue to maintain our competitiveness. The amendments outlined in the bill are a good step towards reducing regulatory barriers that limit our potential as food producers. Specific to beef producers, we are proud of the ambitious environmental goals we have set for ourselves. Having quicker access to innovative products that help us achieve these goals are key, whether it is reducing methane emissions or improving the efficiency of the animal. Canadian beef farmers and ranchers are already leading the world in sustainable beef production, with less than half the global average of greenhouse gas emissions per pound of beef, and we're not resting on our laurels. Our 2030 goals are ambitious and aim to reduce our emissions intensity by another 33%. Bill C-359 is a practical piece of legislation that can help us work together to meet our aligned environmental objectives by reducing regulatory red tape. We encourage all parliamentarians to look at this bill as a guiding step. What other regulatory barriers are we putting on food producers? At a time when global food security is a major discussion, we should put a food lens on our policies and legislation. How can we help food producers grow food safely and efficiently, both for Canadians and people around the world? The Canadian Cattle Association would be pleased to continue this conversation. We support Bill C-359's principle of provisional registration and approval for new animal feeds, and will look at how the bill builds upon ongoing advances being considered in the feed regulations. What other common sense regulatory changes can we look at to help our farmers and ranchers continue to produce high quality Canadian grown food with our competitive and sustainable advantage? We look forward to working with Kody and all members of Parliament to study this bill in detail and work together to achieve the best outcomes for our producers. Thank you.
I'll now invite up Jan VanderHout, who is the president of Fruit and Vegetable Growers of Canada. Over to you.
Thank you, Kody. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be standing here today to express the Fruit and Vegetable Growers of Canada's strong support for MP Kody Blois' newly introduced private members bill, and we just found it this morning, 359. To amend the Feeds Act, the Seeds Act, and the Pest Control Products Act. fruit and vegetable growers have strongly supported the ongoing initiative for a renewed, efficient, and adequately funded pesticide regulatory system that supports Canadian agriculture. This bill represents a significant leap toward creating a competitive, sustainable, and resilient sector, while also ensuring safety to human health and the environment. We are particularly optimistic about the potential for environmental benefits and the reduction of regulatory burdens on Canadian growers. This bill is important for Canadian growers for a multitude of reasons. First, it will enable quicker access to innovative solutions that protect our crops more efficiently. Second, a faster approval process reduces both time and financial costs for growers. We also recognize the bill's potential for environmental benefits by enabling the use of sustainable crop protection products in a time when climate change poses unprecedented challenges to agriculture. Such agility and resilience are invaluable. Climate change introduces new variables into crop management, including the emergence of novel pests and diseases previously unseen in Canadian agriculture. The bill's streamlined approach to approving crop protection products allows for quicker responses to these unpredictable challenges, thereby fortifying the agricultural sector's resilience against climate change, against a changing climate, and empowering a more sustainable fruit and vegetable production system. Lastly, this bill presents a streamlined approach to address our specific concerns without adding unnecessary administrative burdens on government agencies, creating a win-win scenario for both growers and regulators. On behalf of FVGC, thank you, MP Blois, for bringing this bill and these issues before Canadian legislatures. I look forward to working with parliamentarians so that we can get this bill passed and bring in a new era for sustainable and innovative agriculture in Canada. Thank you.
So I'll be speaking of efficiency. What I'll do is I'll introduce next Rick White, who's President and CEO of the Canadian Canola Growers Association, and then I will not come back to the mic. I'll just let you go, Mr. Larkin. Kyle is the Executive Director of Grain Growers of Canada. So over to you, Rick.
Thank you very much, Cody. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm also joined here with our Vice President at CCJ of Government and Industry Relations, Mr. Dave Carey. We represent 43,000 canola farmers on national and international policies that impact on-farm profitability. Canola is a Canadian success story, and it directly contributes $29.9 billion a year to the Canadian economy. CCJ's vision is to help farmers succeed. It's very simple, which is why I'm pleased to be here today to offer our support for Cody's Private Members Bill C-359. And canola farmers are always early adopters of innovation such as biotechnology, conservation tillage, and precision agriculture, and they deploy the latest and greatest crop protection fertilizer technologies on farm. Our members are committed to sustainability and producing a high-quality crop, canola crop for food, feed, and fuel markets here in Canada and around the world. In recent years, we have seen considerable delays in the introduction of new canola seed varieties as our domestic regulatory system can't seem to keep up with advancement in new agricultural technologies such as gene editing. While we feel strongly that Canada ranks amongst the best in the world in terms of our scientists and regulators, we know that there are unnecessary layers of red tape, bureaucracy, and funding that are preventing us from a more efficient and expeditious review and approval process here in Canada. If we don't act, these approval delays will hurt Canada's reputation and lead to Canada being viewed as a market with no clear path to commercialization for agricultural innovation. Government approval delays and adequate resourcing don't appear to be an issue for our key trading partners and competitors like the U.S. and Mexico, who have clear pathways from discovery to R&D to regulatory approval and ultimately commercialization. Therefore, we applaud Mr. Blois for his vision and willingness to introduce this private member's bill to ensure that Canadian farmers aren't at a competitive disadvantage to farmers around the world in accessing the latest technological innovations. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us here today. My name is Kyle Larkin, and I'm proud to be here on behalf of the Grain Growers of Canada, also known as GGC, to support this important piece of legislation. As the national voice for Canada's grain farmers, GGC represents over 65,000 producers through 14 national, provincial, and regional grower groups. Our members are trade-oriented, sustainable, and innovative. As a farmer-driven association for the grain sector, GGC advocates for federal policy that supports the competitiveness and profitability of grain farmers across Canada. For grain farmers, competitiveness and sustainability are equally important, and that's exactly how this legislation will support producers. To ensure that we continue to grow our production to meet rising food demand domestically and internationally, farmers require the latest and most innovative products on the market. These products are also essential to grain producers reducing their greenhouse gas emissions and helping the government reach its ambitious net zero objectives. For example, innovative pest control products are what has allowed thousands of farmers to practice conservation tillage, sequestering hundreds of megatons of greenhouse gases over the past decades. Simply put, Canadian grain farmers require the most innovative seed and pest control products to remain internationally competitiveness while also addressing our climate change challenges. This legislation will add more tools to the producer's toolbox that they can utilize to increase crop yields and reduce their carbon footprint. Grain farmers from across Canada would like to thank Member of Parliament Kody Blois for introducing this crucial piece of legislation. We would also ask that the government and all members of Parliament provide their full support. Thank you.
So as you've heard, certainly stakeholders across the country see this as an important initiative. I think it was well said from one of our speakers here today that we appreciate the science and the good work that our regulatory agencies represent in Canada, and we want to give them even more tools to be able to consider other science from other trusted jurisdictions to help expedite and support their work to make sure that we are focused on competitiveness for Canadian farmers. But I'm going to leave it at that, and if there's any questions either online or in the room, I'll turn it over to the press gallery.
Well, we don't have any questions in the room at the time. We have 2 attendees online. If you'd like to ask a question, please use the raise hand function on the Zoom, and I will select you to ask a question. Once again, the 2 attendees online, if there are no further questions from you, I will conclude this press conference.
Okay.
No questions at this time.
It was that comprehensive. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Recording stopped.